Morning guys, I'm the Tech Prepper. Hope you're all doing well. Last week I did a small experiment where I took my 72-hour bag and went into the Tonto National Forest with a full loadout, and I realized out of that exercise that bugging out on foot would be a bad idea. So this past Labor Day weekend I went ahead and decided to do a trip with the boys. We did a 2-night, 3-day trip. Kind of an overlanding trip with the Jeeps, and I thought that would actually be a more realistic bugging out exercise, and didn't realize that till this morning, and hence the video. And what I like about the ability to bug out on vehicles with a group, having multiple vehicles, is that you solve to some extent the capacity problem, and also the ability for people in your group that can't move as easily on foot. So we're going to talk about that today, and really I'm going to talk about the intersection, as far as I see it, between camping as a dry run for preparation. I have a whole bunch of people on the channel that have sent me mail and other forms of communication asking, how do I get into prepping? And in my mind, the easiest way to start is with a 3-day window. Typically for minor service disruption, if you can get through a 3-day window yourself, you're on a good start to success, and then you can always add more provisions and skills to go from that 3-day to 3 weeks to 3 months and beyond. So let's talk a little bit about that. All right, so let me give you the highlights. So we decided to take 2 Jeeps, 2 people, myself and my son went on a trip, and we decided to head out to Crown King, Arizona, to escape the hot temperatures. So for us, one way, it's actually about 58 miles. Half of that was driving to the exit on I-17. The other 28 to 30 miles was all dirt road. The first 15 miles or so was kind of washboard. They do maintain the roads every once in a while, so it was a little bit bumpy for us. And what we decided to do to establish communications was just use the FRS radios. I think I've got one here on the clip, since my son is not a licensed amateur radio operator. And I'll say, for what we were able to do on the single battery charge, we were able to use that the entire 2.5 days we were out there. So we did about 15 miles on that dirt road and ended up in a very small town called Cleator, Arizona. I believe in 2020 the population was 8 single digits. And it was just a small bar and general store. We popped in and had a couple of beers. I had a non-alcoholic beer before we hit the trail onto Crown King. The trail to Crown King was actually kind of interesting. It wasn't as washboardy. We were able to see the change in the vegetation and climbed pretty quickly. We started leaving the house at about 2,100 feet of elevation. I think Cleator was maybe 3,600 feet, and then when we got into Crown King we were well above a mile. And once we got into Crown King, we decided to explore some trails, and we weren't new to the area, or we weren't used to the area, so we decided to just reset the odometer and hit a few trails and look for some spurs. And after a bit of kind of roaming around, we actually found some places where we can do some dispersed camping without a permit or any kind of reservation, which was kind of nice. And the 4x4 Jeeps came in really handy. There's a couple places we went, there was really no way for even a truck to get into that kind of area as easily as we did. In fact, I would think it would be pretty much impossible unless you have an overbuilt truck. So the vehicles for us also proved to be a really viable long-term transportation system, as well as being able to get us to some terrain that would otherwise prevent other vehicles. And again, the comms are great, staying in communication with the FRS radios while we were letting each other know what was going on, whether someone had to pass me from the vehicle behind me, or whether my son saw something out in the distance, or just to pull over and just to relieve yourself, or whatever you had to do to stretch your legs was kind of nice. So the Jeeps and those small FRS radios were really quite nice. Now we'll talk a little bit about some of the other comms in a bit. So I do have a list because it's going to be kind of lengthy. I'll put the timestamps on the screen. So we're going to talk about water, shelter, food, cook systems, fire, hygiene, trash, comms, planning, and packing, and whatever else comes through my head. And again, the whole idea here is how getting into car camping as a first step can help you think about getting into the right mindset and what kind of gear you might need for that 72-hour window, because effectively that's what we did. We did a 72-hour off-grid exercise just by going camping. So that's my first recommendation, is plan a weekend, maybe just start with an overnighter. And we're going to talk about gear that you don't necessarily need to buy. You probably have most of this gear at home and can replace pieces over time. And while some of the gear is not appropriate when you're packing out on foot, it works fine when you have the vehicles and can have bulkier items that are not really designed for camping use, but would be perfectly fine for doing everything else you need. Oh, and one other thing. The other cool thing about this exercise is that we technically, by design, made ourselves a 72-hour refugee or refugees, which is kind of cool that you're able to really take care of all of your needs. And anything you don't have, there's quite a room for kind of improvising along the way, which I think is a valuable skill. So let's talk about water. I see the need for two types of water. The first is drinking water, and the second is kind of water for cleaning cookware and also hygiene. And my personal preference, what I found works well for me, is I tend to bring myself 1 gallon of drinking water per day, and then about a half gallon or a quarter gallon for kind of everything else, washing dishes. And we'll talk about that and how to conserve water in a bit. In terms of storage, I really like the 3.5 gallon water bricks. They're really cool because they are basically like Legos. They're stackable. They have wide spouts, and they even have spigots that you can attach for easily decanting. And in fact, you can use that for long-term water storage in the house. When we were living in an apartment with limited space, we would actually get about 4 or 5 of these water bricks, each with 3.5 gallons, and stack them in the garage in a vertical configuration, and it worked great. I also like to bring with me the Smart waters. They're like the 1 liter bottles. They're really great for like the guys that do thru hiking, because the water bottles themselves are, one, they're disposable, but they also can be reused quite a bit and take some punishment, because it does have beefier plastic. And they have threads, so if you have the Sawyer Mini filter, you can actually thread that directly on, and with the straw, drink straight out of it, which is really cool. We didn't have to filter water on this trip, but there was plenty of water being at that elevation, so we could have very easily extended our time out there with our Sawyer Mini filter, boiling water, or using our water purification tablets. So yeah, water I think is something to consider, and again, I can reuse that investment in the water brick in my case at home and while camping. So a really nice piece of kit. Number 2 is shelter, and I'm trying to order these in priority of necessity. So for shelter, for those of you who have been following along on the channel, I need to get out from under the heat, and I actually carry with me a small tarp and my trekking poles, coupled with a couple pieces of paracord and some tent stakes. I'm actually able to make a lean-to when I'm out in the backcountry. For this trip, I reused that same gear and ran it off the top of the Jeep. It works incredibly well with basically just a couple of carabiners to clip it onto the roll cage. So really cool stuff. Really inexpensive build. I would probably say if you already have the trekking poles and a tarp, it's maybe a few bucks in carabiners and paracord. In fact, you don't even need the carabiners. I just like them for quick deployments. So it was cool enough, and actually not hot enough at the same time, where I could have technically slept underneath that and even got some shelter from the rain. Outside of that, we also brought our normal camping tents. I have a 2-person tungsten ultralight tent, and it's basically a glorified mosquito net. More on mosquitoes in a bit. Those guys completely bit me up. So shelter system is pretty easy. Again, since we were car camping, and I only have a a quilt that's good to about 30 degrees. I actually augmented that with a surplus military wool blanket, and I actually brought my pillow from home. So having the vehicles also gives you the ability to throw in a few heavier weight comfort items, which are really quite nice and can make all the difference in a bad situation. So let's talk about food. This one was an eye-opener for me since I don't do a whole lot of car camping or overlanding. I think I'm going to do more of it. I think this is probably my third overlanding trip that I've done in the last couple years because I prefer to be on foot. And I've always planned my meals around my ability to pack out gear. So it's like oatmeal for breakfast, snacks basically for lunch, like cured meats, dried meats, nuts, really simple stuff. And then for dinner is usually a freeze-dried meal or a pasta where all I have to do is boil water. But there are lots of pantry options. So my son, he brought, for this first night, we had enough refrigeration because we brought our ice chest. And I'll talk about that in a second, how we pack our ice chests. He brought some meat, and we were able to grill that up. But for our sides, we had instant potatoes, which were quite nice. Just add water, instant gravy. So our meals were really hearty. We were able to bring canned goods that just required a little bit of warming on the stovetop. So it was just like corn and beans. So you have a lot of items already in your pantry that would transition well to a car camping situation. All right, so in terms of our cook system, we actually had three. We didn't need this many redundancies. Again, we wanted to have a good time. The goal was not to like suffer out there. So I brought a small portable charcoal barbecue with some charcoal and the starter for it. Not fluid, but the little packet or the little fire starters. They worked great. The only problem with that is that if there is like a unusually high fire danger, you can't use those, but for us it was really nice. We didn't have that restriction this time, and we're able to prepare a couple of meals over the grill. We could have also used the fire pit. There were ample fire pits so long as we brought a grate, but we did not do that. We also brought two Coleman stoves. We didn't really do a good job of checking to see what each other brought, but it was just a simple 2-burner stove with the propane tanks you get from Walmart or not Kmart. I think they're out of business. But more than enough fuel to last us our whole trip. And then I always carry with me my small packing or camping stove or hiking stove that just is a simple single burner where I can place items right on top of the stove. And this is actually great, if the power goes out and your range is electric, for example, you can absolutely fall back at home to using your little grill, using your propane stoves that you have, either the single burner or the Coleman. Heck, you can even use your barbecue and start cooking your stuff outside or boiling water. I think during the in Texas, when you guys had that cold front, people couldn't figure out how to get water. You could have boiled the snow basically on your grill. So just keep that in mind. So there's a lot of overlap between some of the skills you develop while being in the backcountry that can apply to some natural disasters that may occur at home. And the cool thing about, let's talk about fire for a bit. I was going to say, the problem with the fuel canisters is that they do run out over time, or sometimes you can have a failure with the regulator, or maybe you don't have additional gaskets or seals. So cooking over the fire is a great way. So I actually have a fairly low-tech method that I like to use. So I'll typically bring a small bundle. But what I'll do is, as my fire starter, to get things going, I will take my $15 Moranoff Swedish blade, and I will basically baton it and cut off very thin pieces to really start the fire. The Moranoff that I have at the back end also has a ferro rod, so I don't need any matches or lighters. I could just strike it to get a spark going. And then I always carry with me, with the exception of this trip, I forgot it, I have Vaseline with cotton balls, and it makes an incredible fire starter. Luckily, my son, in his go bag, he had one. I talked to him about it years ago, and he basically had a tin just packed full with those cotton balls. So one spark, just let that guy go, and then between those small baton shavings of the firewood, we were able to get that going. So we had the fire, and we actually got to the point where we had some really nice embers and could have easily cooked all of our food on that with the fire source. So I'll put a link to that More Light My Fire. I like it because it's a $15 to $24 blade, and I can baton the heck out of it. I've been doing it now for about 2 years, and it actually still works pretty good. So I don't feel bad just really abusing that knife out in the field. So let's also talk about personal hygiene. So yes, everybody that goes out needs to poop in the woods when you're at a dispersed camping site. There are no facilities. So I actually found it very helpful to bring a few items. First is, if you're car camping, bring a roll of toilet paper from home. It's just so much easier. You don't need to buy any special camping toilet paper. And number two, my personal preference, since there is no running water, is to bring the baby wipes with you. And they've got the small, travel size ones, or you could just get the big ones that anybody with kids knows about. And they absolutely are also, in my mind, a morale item. To stay nice and tidy. And then I actually found the trenching military shovels to be fantastic for digging a trench to bury your human waste. And I picked mine up for $3 at a garage sale. My son picked it up, I forget where, for like $5. There's a site that I'm not affiliated with called Sportsman's Guide, and I tend to buy a lot of this inexpensive gear through them, if not at the military surplus store. Oh, you know what? Speaking of the military surplus store, camping cookware items. I forgot to mention that. So if you don't have anything, bring the pots and pans you have from home. The smaller ones, probably the better. But I found that at least Sportsman's Guide has a lot of really cool surplus military from a lot of different militaries throughout the country that have mess kits and forks, knives, utensils, and they are great, and they will not break the bank. I mean, I would say all the stuff I buy from them, while it's not the greatest, it's $4 here, $3 there, $5 there. So really encourage everybody to take a look at some surplus military goods to get some cost-effective camping gear. All right, so another tip, trash. So I pack out everything. I try to go back to my old days in the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and have that philosophy of leave your site cleaner than what you found. And I tend to keep the packing material, especially if they're Ziploc bags, and stuff that gets shipped to the house. And I save that over time, and I just stuff them in one bag. And it's really nice to basically every day have like 1 or 2 Ziploc bags that you can throw your cans and paper towels and all that good stuff in, and then put that in a larger, kitchen bag or trash bag so you can pack that all out. So good way to, again, be conscious of all the stuff that you're producing in terms of waste. And it's actually ridiculous. For 2 of us, we had 1 full tall kitchen bag after the 2.5 days out in the field. All right, so let's talk about comms. So we had 4 different types of comms. We had the FRS, the Family Radio Service radios. Those are the radios you see at Walmart in the blister packs for like $30. You don't need a license for those. They have limitations in terms of their ability to communicate, but for us, communicating between 2 vehicles or even just going up a trail and one person being down at the bottom, they're fine for about a mile. They say 32 miles in some of these things. That's BS. I don't believe it unless you have perfect line of sight, and even then I don't know. Then I also had my normal ham radio HT. I brought my Yaesu FT60R, and the first thing I like to do when I get to a site is pull out the Repeater Book app because it's fully offline. It knows my location, and I try to program a local repeater. Sorry about the noise, guys. They're doing some construction behind us. So I got into the local repeater, no problem. I actually woke up the repeater because it came back with the kind of canned synthesized acknowledgement that you were getting into the repeater. Didn't get anybody, actually, but it did work in my ability to program it. Then in the Jeep, I have the Kenwood D710 GA. That's a true dual-band, dual VFO rig with APRS capabilities. And I'll play a clip of it in a second here, but I was able to do an FM 2-meter simplex contact all the way down here to Phoenix from the Prescott National Forest. So extremely happy with that performance. So let's take a listen. KT1, are you on?
Can you hear me? KW7 Echo?
Yeah, KW7 Echo, you're coming in 5959.
Are you sure? 5 and 9? Or are you just trying to be a nice guy?
So I'm also a YouTuber. I go by the handle of the Tech Prepper, and I'm on a GoPro right now. So if you want, I can send you the audio, but you sound fantastic. You're booming.
Well, I'm hearing you. You're about a quarter scale. What was the suffix of the call? I've been not paying attention. I know it's KR1.
Negative. It's Kilo Tango 1, Romeo Uniform November, KT1 RUN. The other cool thing outside of that contact and that rag chew to kind of spend some time out there was the APRS support. So that if you guys who follow the channel know, I like to be able to send a text message to my wife or an email to my wife letting her know where I am and what my current state is, whether I'm okay. And with the Kenwood D710GA, I was able to send an APRS message to let her know when we arrived, when we switched camps, and she was able to receive all the messages. The one note was the first night, the first camp, I was not able to make any kind of radio communications possible, even though I did attempt to send those messages. The second day, we moved to 6,300 feet from about 6,000, and I was on a slightly different side of the peak, and we were able to send all of those messages through. So it's just one of those other things that reminds me that communications may not always work the way you want to. For me, I had to wait till the second day to have effective communication with my wife. All right, guys, I really do apologize about that noise. The other radio I brought with me was my normal man pack. That is my Yaesu FT857D man pack, all mode, all band capabilities. I did go ahead and just play around with it, but I didn't really try to make any contacts. In terms of power, I threw up the Power Film 20-watt solar panels on the top of my tarp shelter and was able to top off the BioWino battery for that radio through the Buddy Pole Power Mini version 2 solar charge controller. In fact, we use that solar charge controller since it has USB out on it to charge both of our phones up. We never got cell reception the entire trip, but we did watch and listen to some things in the evening when we went to bed at night, and we were able to top off the battery using the 4.5 amp hour BioWino battery, and then always keep that topped off with the solar. So communications, I would say, were 50-50 success, and I was expecting it, that it would work in some areas and not in some others. If I really had to, I had, like I said, full HF capabilities, so I could have put up my Nivis antenna, my 40 or 80 meter dipole, and would have been able to pretty much work the entire state of Arizona and beyond to about 500 miles. So another plug here, I would recommend anybody who's not a licensed amateur operator to at least get their tech license, but if you can, make the investment and get your general if you're in the US. It just opens up doors for you like you would not imagine. The last kind of thing, let's talk about packing and planning. This trip, we didn't plan very well. We just had some criteria. We wanted to basically escape the temperatures. We've been hovering about 100 degrees plus humidity here. So the Prescott National Forest, when I had looked up areas to go to, it had a low of about 50 and a high of about 79 degrees Fahrenheit, so that was the spot. I did print offline maps and also used a cool app that someone recommended on Instagram called Organic Maps, and that technically gave me turn-by-turn directions fully offline, assuming I downloaded the map beforehand. I use that as a backup every once in a while. But for the most part, we stuck to the paper maps. We also left copies with my wife. We let her know where we were planning on going as best we could. She didn't exactly know which campsite we were at the first night since it was dispersed, but the second night I was actually able to send her GPS coordinates and do all that stuff over SMS through the APRS capabilities on the Kenwood. So letting somebody know where you are. In terms of fuel, we have limited capacities and don't have additional fuel tanks. That's something we're going to work on in the future. So I also did look along the route what was kind of the last safe opportunity to top off because there, I believe, might have been a gas station somewhere on that path. I really can't recall, but we decided to fuel up on I-17. And since we only had about a 30-mile trip and back, it wasn't all that bad. But we did know that we would go through more fuel going at the, as low as a few miles per hour up to about 15 or 20 miles per hour, depending on what the conditions were on the dirt road. So yeah, planning was a big thing. Planning, the meals, the quantities. We actually ended up coming back with a lot more food than we thought we would. We just weren't very, very hungry. So make sure you take the time to plan the location, let people know where you are, plan the logistics for things like fuel. Things that went horribly bad that I am correcting now, we've had a really unusually high monsoon season in July, and the mosquitoes were everywhere. I did have mosquito repellent, but for me, they still ate me up. I probably have about 100 bites on me, and I do have a reaction to them. So luckily I did have Benadryl with me, and I did have some bug spray. It's the deep freeze stuff. I'm not convinced that's going to work for me personally. So out of this exercise, I'm looking for stuff with DEET. I know there's a chemical issue there, but for these small trips, I think I'm going to see if that improves anything. I've also decided to invest in 2 mosquito nets with a wide-brimmed hat. And then I'm actually going to try my luck at a couple of the bug repelling candles. And if those 3 work, I'm going to go ahead and share those with you guys on the channel. I'm not going to recommend anything as of yet. I'll put the links down below if you guys want to make your own decision and support the channel that way. All right, guys, this is a long video, but I just wanted to talk about kind of where I'm coming from. But the bottom line is, I think taking the family on a camping trip, car camping with the gear you have, and just getting a taste for being offline, off-grid for a 72-hour window is an excellent way to prepare for small, localized emergencies as a first step. And in my mind, I think it beats going out on foot if you have to bug out. We are about 60 subscribers short of 5,000, so thank you, everybody. I'm going to do something special in terms of a giveaway. I haven't quite decided if I want to make a cup, a t-shirt, give away a Raspberry Pi for the MCOM Tools project, give away some prepper stuff I really love. I'll buy them again brand new on Amazon and send them to you. So I'll figure out something fun to do. So I'll give away a couple of prizes. Hopefully I'm not more than a couple weeks away from that. All right, guys, I'm the Tech Prepper. Be strong, be safe, and be prepared. We're just outside of Crown King by, about 3 miles. And what the deuce?